Because Joe is really posturing.
Oh, yeah. That's his whole thing.
He's really posturing as like the guy's guy, right? Like the hard hat. Joe Hard Hat.
Middle class Joe.
Yeah, middle class Joe. Here he is. Where was this where he was speaking? This number 3. Oh, wait. Oh, this is the announcement video? Where did you do the today? All right, let's hear the announcement video. Today, he is in Pittsburgh talking to union guys. He is officially kicking off his campaign at the Teamsters Local 429 in Pittsburgh. Do you know where he was Thursday in the unofficial kickoff? He was in Philadelphia at a Comcast fundraiser. Now, aside from Comcast being a wretched company, there was a longtime Biden ally there bundling money, a guy named Stephen Kozin. This comes from Eric Levitz in New York Magazine. Kozin is the chairman of Kozin O'Connor. That is a big law firm.
Do they help people recover from bankruptcies and medical debts?
You know what?
Provide a social service?
You know what? They don't.
Oh, it's surprising.
Mike Elk over at the Payday Report, noted on Wednesday that if you go to Kozin O'Connor's website, they have a breakdown of what they do for their clients. Labor relations and disputes. So in other words, you got to imagine Joe Hardhat, his best bud, probably protects unions, fights on behalf of unions. And, oh, wait a second. Ooh, no, actually, this is weird. It's the opposite. Kozin O'Connor represents a broad spectrum of private and public sector employers in labor relations and disputes. In other words, they fight against unions. For our unionized clients, we handle unfair labor practice proceedings in grievance arbitrations, negotiate individual and multi-employer collective bargaining agreements, prepare for and respond to picket lines, strikes, lockouts, and other economic campaigns, and work with employers during union election campaigns.
Help them more effectively establish unions in a hostile corporate environment?
Right. We also help employers avoid unionization through positive employee relations and regain non-union status when employees indicate they no longer wish to be union represented. So in other words, they're a union-busting law firm.
Scranton Joe.
Bankruptcy.
Joe. I want you to lose your life because you got hit by a car, and I hang around with some of the scummiest law firms on planet Earth.
But hold on. He also likes to write and script. Here we go. Here's his campaign video.
Charlottesville, Virginia is home to the author of one of the great documents in human history. We know it by heart. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. We've heard it so often, it's almost a cliche, but it's who we are. We haven't always lived up to these ideals. Jefferson himself didn't, but we have never before walked away from them. Charlottesville is also home to a defining moment for this nation in the last few years. It was there on August of 2017 we saw Klansmen and white supremacists and neo-Nazis come out in the open. Their crazed faces, illuminated by torches, veins bulging, and bearing the fangs of racism, chanting the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s. And they were met by a courageous group of Americans, and a violent clash ensued. And a brave young woman lost her life. And that's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides, very fine people on both sides. With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it. And in that moment, I knew the threat to this nation was unlike any I had ever seen in my lifetime. I wrote at the time that we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. Well, that's even more true today. We are in the battle for the soul of this nation. I believe history will look back on 4 years of this president and all he embraces as an aberrant moment in time. But if we give Donald Trump 8 years in the White House, he will forever and fundamentally alter the character of this nation, who we are. And I cannot stand by and watch that happen. The core values of this nation.
Oh God, I don't.
Here we
honestly,
go.
I can't
Come
even-
on,
I
man.
can't.
It's the montage now.
I can't.
Dude,
I can't.
hella silent, bro.
But I want to
How
remind
inspirational.
I want to remind Joe Biden that one of the things that Donald Trump embraces is anti-unionism. That Joe Biden apparently has no problem at least accepting money from some of the biggest anti-union fighters in the country. One of the things that Donald Trump also embraces would be the harshest type of relationship between creditors and those in debt in this country, which apparently Joe Biden has a history of. Dismissive misogyny, acting as if women are simply props for you in some way, like Stacey Abrams or Elizabeth Warren, or frankly, Heather Heyer. Heather Heyer's mom does not appreciate her child being basically reduced to Joe Biden's pitch for why he should be president.
Of course, it's never far from your mind and your heart. Did former VP Biden call you about this?
I got a call from him yesterday at 4:30 in the afternoon. That was the first time I had ever spoken to Joe Biden or anybody related to his office or anything.
What did he say?
I was trying to remember how the conversation started. I remember we talked a lot about bereavement because, he's lost a son and a wife and daughter. And we talked about how forming a foundation helps you survive. But that's really all the kinds of things we talked about. I think he said something about I would have reached out sooner, but I wasn't sure how you would feel. And I commented, yes, I noticed you didn't mention her name because you hadn't contacted me. So we sort of acknowledged that much.
Do you wish that he had mentioned her name?
Not particularly. It's not about her. The issue is about the hate. It's not about Heather.
Yeah. And so was he calling for your approval or to make sure that you were okay? I mean, what was the upshot of his call?
Probably to make sure I was okay. Apparently there were rumors swirling that I was devastated and traumatized, and none of those things were true.
So in other words, Joe Biden is on a tour right now to make sure he doesn't mess up and appear as if he was invested in these questions, maybe a little bit more than he was. Maybe just a little bit more than he was. I mean, I happen to think, Joe Biden right now, I think is basically at the top of the most of the polls at this point. But I have a feeling a lot of this stuff is going to catch up with him. Here is Joe Biden's non-apology to Anita Hill. And apparently Anita Hill, we'll read what she said afterwards.
Knowing you, for as long as I have, I don't know why it took you so long to call her. I wish it had happened earlier.
Well, I tell you what the deal was. I did not, since I had publicly apologized for the way she was treated, I'd publicly said it, I publicly had given credit for her, the contribution she made to begin to change this culture in a significant way, that what I didn't want to do, and I didn't want to, quote, invade her space. I didn't want to get in the situation where this became, and then when I heard all this about and it was legitimate, expecting a call every time the phone rang, and so I spoke to some leading women advocates in this area, someone knew her, and I said, could you see whether she'd take my call?
Yeah.
And I was grateful she took my call.
You know, I think what she wants you to say is, I'm sorry for the way I treated you, not for the way you were treated. I think that would be closer.
Well, but I'm sorry the way she got treated. In terms of, I never heard say, if you go back and look what I said and didn't say, I don't think I treated her badly. I took on her opposition, what I couldn't figure out how to do, and we still haven't figured it out.
Yeah.
How do you stop people from asking inflammatory questions?
Okay, so there's Joe Biden saying, I did nothing wrong. When I knew there was 3 other women who would corroborate at least that type of behavior, of being a victim of that behavior, and I did not bring them in front of the committee, I did nothing wrong. When I let her out there to dangle in the wind, knowing that there was corroboration, I did nothing wrong. Everything is in the passive voice. This is a guy who doesn't get it. What would be so bad for him to say? You got to ask yourself, is it just sheer arrogance? This guy's willing to do just about anything to become president. Is it just sheer arrogance? Or is he afraid that if he apologizes, that he's kowtowing too much to the people that he wants to appeal to? It's one of those two things. I don't know which is worse.
A more narrow point is, as a chair of the committee, wouldn't he have been in a position to, as an example, like he said, he doesn't know how to stop defamatory statements. If you watch that clip of particularly Arlen Specter just like terrorizing her and trying to completely eviscerate her character and life, he wouldn't have been in a position to step over him and say, hey, you need to reorient your line of questioning here. You can ask a question, you can critique, you can defend your witness, but you're just using a national platform. You're using this hearing to just, personally attack her and potentially even endanger her life. You can't do that. I mean, wouldn't he have been in a position to do even the narrow metric that he just set for himself?
I mean, now you're asking him to ignore Senate comedy and
is that where
criticize one of his fellow?
Well, that probably was it, right?
I would.
But
imagine
I mean, he
that's
just set that standard for himself.
He
just said, "What can I do about those comments?" My understanding as chairman of a committee, you can actually do a little bit.
Or
when one of your colleagues starts terrorizing,
we could look back
a
on
witness.
TV and see that you may have you were like, hey, wait a second, like even if you couldn't get them stopped, like show some measure of defense.
This is disgusting. I object to it.
All right.